What happens when family events expose the dark side of love? Family events. Have you ever felt invisible in your own family? Like you're doing everything right, yet no one really notices? In today's video, we'll dive into the emotional struggles that often arise in family events and the deep impact they can have. If you can relate to feeling overlooked or underappreciated, this story might just speak to you. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Silent Wars for more heartfelt stories like this one. Let's explore together how family dynamics shape our lives. Have you ever felt like you're invisible in your own family? That no matter how hard you try, you're just never truly seen? Ethan knew this feeling all too well. Growing up, he wasn't the troublemaker, nor was he the golden child. He was the one stuck in the middle, constantly doing what was expected of him, yet somehow never enough to stand out in a family that seemed to favor everyone else. Ethan's family always had room for Travis, his younger brother, who could do no wrong in their eyes. Travis was the one who skipped chores, failed classes, and talked back to their parents without facing any real consequences. Ethan, on the other hand, worked tirelessly to prove his worth. He made sure his grades were solid, helped around the house, and stayed out of trouble, hoping that one day his parents would see his effort and appreciate him. But despite all his hard work, his sacrifices, and the quiet hope that one day he'd be treated with the same care, nothing ever changed. Travis would always be the one who got the attention, and Ethan would always be the one overlooked. It wasn't just the big moments that hurt, though those cut the deepest. It was the small, everyday things. Ethan would come home after a long day of work, exhausted and hoping for a moment of acknowledgement. But instead, he was met with a half-eaten plate of food left on the table for him to clean up. His brother Travis would be sitting on the couch, oblivious to the mess, completely tuned out in his world, while Ethan was left to pick up the pieces of a life that didn't seem to value him. The family dynamic was never overtly hostile, but it was always clear where Ethan stood: the silent outcast. His efforts were never enough. His successes went unnoticed while Travis's failures were excused time and time again. Ethan's parents would dismiss his feelings with comments like, "You're being too sensitive," or, "Why can't you just be more supportive of your brother?" It was a never-ending cycle, where no matter how much Ethan gave, it was never enough to change his place in the family. But deep down, Ethan began to realize something. They didn't see him. And maybe, just maybe, he didn't need to keep trying to prove his worth to a family that had already made up their mind. Ethan had always done what was expected of him. He worked tirelessly, balancing a part-time job at the local grocery store while making sure his grades stayed up. Every penny he earned was saved with a goal in mind, hoping that one day it would be enough to escape the shadow of his family's favoritism. He was the responsible one, the one who always tried to meet everyone's expectations, but it never seemed to matter. Despite all of his efforts, all he ever received from his family was disregard. On the other hand, his younger brother Travis lived a life free from any real responsibility. While Ethan worked hard to make ends meet and keep his parents happy, Travis spent his days playing video games, avoiding chores, and never lifting a finger. Despite his lack of effort, their parents adored him. He was the fun one, the one who could get away with everything. And yet somehow, he always seemed to be the one to receive the praise and attention. Ethan, on the other hand, was just a shadow in their eyes. Ethan had tried countless times to speak up, to voice how he felt about the disparity in treatment between him and his brother. But every time he did, his words were shut down. "Stop complaining, Ethan," his parents would say. "You need to stop being so sensitive. Just accept things for what they are." It was as if his feelings didn't matter, as if his hard work and effort weren't worth acknowledging. It was always Travis who was the priority, and Ethan was left to shoulder the weight of his own expectations while being ignored by the people who should have cared the most. But it wasn't until one fateful night that everything came to a head. Ethan had just returned from his part-time job, exhausted, his mind reeling from the constant sense of being overlooked. He walked into the house, hoping for a moment of peace, but instead, he found his brother sprawled out on the couch, completely zoned into a video game. The house was a mess, and once again, it was Ethan who was expected to clean up after everyone. That night, the injustice of it all hit him harder than ever before. It was the final straw. And in that moment, Ethan realized that he had been sacrificing his happiness, his worth, and his future for a family that would never truly see him. This time, he wasn't going to let it go. It was time to stand up for himself. It was a Saturday evening, and Ethan had just finished a grueling shift at the local grocery store. His legs were sore, his mind was exhausted, and all he wanted was a quiet evening to unwind. He had been looking forward to this moment all day, craving some peace and the opportunity to relax in his own space. But as he stepped through the front door, he found everything shattered in an instant. There, sprawled out on the couch, was Travis. The one person Ethan had spent years tolerating, the one person who could do no wrong in the eyes of their parents. But this time, Ethan wasn't going to let it slide. Travis wasn't just lounging around. He had tossed Ethan's belongings around the room like they didn't matter. Papers were scattered everywhere, and Ethan's notes, those painstakingly written notes he had spent days working on, were nowhere to be found. The realization hit Ethan like a ton of bricks. His brother had torn the pages out and thrown them aside as if they were nothing. Ethan's heart sank, and a wave of frustration and disbelief washed over him. This wasn't just about the notes, it was about years of feeling invisible, years of being the family's afterthought. He stood there frozen, staring at the destruction before him. He had worked so hard, sacrificing his time and energy, only to have his efforts disrespected in the most casual of ways. When Ethan confronted Travis, he was met with the most dismissive response imaginable. "Relax, it's just some notes," Travis muttered without even bothering to look up from his game. But that wasn't what cut Ethan to the core. No, it was what Travis said next. "Not like you do anything important anyway." The words hit harder than anything Ethan could have anticipated. It wasn't just a careless comment, it was a stark reminder of everything he had suspected for so long. His family, including his parents, didn't see him. They never had. To them, he was just a background character in their lives, someone who worked hard but never garnered the recognition he deserved. Ethan tried to brush it off, but deep down, it stung. He realized in that moment that it wasn't about the torn notes. It was about the fact that his family had never truly seen him for who he was. And that was the breaking point. It wasn't just the disrespect of his hard work. It was the painful truth that he had been nothing more than an invisible member of his own family. This was the moment everything changed, the moment Ethan decided he would no longer remain the silent, overlooked son. He was done being the family's scapegoat. Later that night, after the chaos with Travis and the mess he'd made of Ethan's things, his parents walked into the room, laughing and chatting like everything was perfectly normal. They shared some inside joke, completely unaware of the storm that had just passed. But the moment their eyes landed on Ethan, the laughter stopped, and the atmosphere shifted. Ethan stood frozen, gripping the torn pages of his notebook in his hands, the weight of everything he had just experienced pressing down on him. His father, ever the enforcer of rules and order, looked at him with disdain, his voice dripping with judgment. "This attitude is exactly why no one wants to be around you," his father said, the words cutting into Ethan like a blade. It wasn't just the harshness of his father's tone, but the implication behind the statement. His father wasn't just upset about his attitude, he was confirming what Ethan had feared all along, that his presence, his very being, was an inconvenience. Ethan stood there, numb, as the words rang in his ears. He had always been the quiet one, the one who stayed out of trouble and did what was expected of him. Yet, here he was being blamed for something that wasn't his fault. His chest tightened as he tried to steady himself, the pain of rejection sinking deeper. But it wasn't over yet. His mother, ever the peacemaker but never really seeing him, let out a long sigh, clearly annoyed by his emotions. "You always overreact," she said dismissively, as if his feelings didn't matter at all. It was in that moment that the realization hit him with full force. His family, the people who were supposed to love and support him, didn't care. They didn't see him, not in the way he needed them to. They had never understood him, never truly valued him for who he was. And then, as if to cement his place in the family's hierarchy of worthlessness, Travis smirked from the couch and added, "No one wants you here." Ethan's heart dropped to his stomach. It wasn't just that Travis didn't care. His parents, the people who should have stood up for him, nodded in agreement. The silence that followed was deafening. His mother didn't say a word. His father didn't argue. They just stood there, as if it was a fact they had accepted long ago. It was in that painful silence, with those cruel words hanging in the air, that Ethan realized everything. The people he had hoped would protect him, the ones he had always sought validation from, had rejected him without a second thought. It was the final straw, the moment he knew he could no longer stay in a place where he wasn't seen, valued, or loved. The crushing weight of it all made him feel smaller than ever, but it also planted the seed for the change that was about to come. That night, after everything that had unfolded, Ethan's decision was final. He walked into his room, not bothering to say another word, and began packing his bags. He didn't even look back. The years of feeling unseen, unappreciated, and unloved had piled up to this moment, a boiling point that couldn't be ignored any longer. His family had made it clear that he was nothing more than an afterthought, a burden to them. The harsh words, the cruel indifference, and the complete lack of support, Ethan realized it wasn't worth staying in a place that didn't value him. His hands shook slightly as he stuffed his clothes into a duffel bag, but there was no hesitation. He was done. The moment his feet crossed the threshold of that house, he knew there was no turning back. The familiar walls that once felt like home now felt like a prison, one that he had locked himself into for far too long. He walked out into the night, the cool air biting at his skin, but somehow he felt lighter. The weight of the years of neglect seemed to lift with each step he took away from that place. He wasn't looking for forgiveness, and he wasn't going back, not yet. The next morning, as Ethan tried to settle into the quiet of his friend's apartment, his phone buzzed relentlessly. Missed calls, texts, from his mom, his dad, Travis. They were all trying to reach him, the messages coming in rapid succession. At first, he just stared at the screen, numb. He could hear his mother's frantic voice in the text messages, begging him to come home. His father's words were more calculated, demanding that he return and fix what had been broken. And then there was Travis, sending message after message, pretending like none of it had ever happened, asking for his help. But Ethan didn't answer. Not yet. They had pushed him to the edge, told him that he didn't matter, that he wasn't worthy of respect. They had written him off and left him to fend for himself. Now, they wanted him back? Now they were reaching out, but it felt too late. The anger still simmered in his chest, but so did the disappointment. He couldn't forgive them right away. Not yet. Ethan needed time to figure out what his next step would be, but one thing was clear. He wasn't going to keep letting them dictate his life. The ball was in his court now. As the days passed after Ethan walked away from his family, the silence was both a relief and a painful reminder of the life he had left behind. His phone remained quiet for a while, and that was exactly what he needed: a break from the constant noise, the guilt trips, the endless expectations. But then, the texts from his parents started again. At first, they were simple and nonchalant, the typical requests for him to come back and fix things. "You're being childish," his dad had said. "Come home. We'll work things out." Ethan ignored them. He wasn't ready to return to that dysfunction. They had made their choice, and so had he. But then, something changed. One afternoon, while he was sitting in the small living room of his friend's apartment, scrolling through his phone, a new message popped up. The sender was his mother. "Your brother is in trouble. We need your help." Ethan's thumb hovered over the message, his heart skipping a beat. What could this be about? For the first time in weeks, his curiosity was piqued. Was this just another desperate plea for him to step in and save Travis? Or was it something more serious? His mind raced, trying to make sense of it all. His parents had never reached out to him like this before, at least, not without asking for money or help with something trivial. This felt different. He stared at the message for a moment before his fingers moved, typing a quick response. What happened? He didn't expect an immediate reply, but it came quickly. His mother's words made his stomach drop. "Travis has been arrested. He stole something from the wrong people. We need your help to get him out." Ethan sat back, the weight of the words sinking in. Arrested? It was hard to process. Travis, the same brother who had tormented him for years, who had been the golden child, was now in real trouble. It wasn't some small mistake he could talk his way out of. He had done something serious, something that landed him in jail. And now, his parents, the very people who had ignored him all this time, were reaching out desperate for help. For once, it wasn't about his money or his achievements. It was about Travis. And for the first time, they were asking him to come back. Not for their convenience, but because they genuinely needed him. Ethan felt a strange mix of emotions: surprise, anger, and even a little satisfaction. They finally needed him. But did that mean he should help? Ethan wasn't sure what to expect when he arrived at his parents' house. But he knew one thing. This was his moment. The air was thick with tension as he pulled into the driveway, watching his father pacing back and forth on the porch, his phone pressed to his ear. His movements were frantic, the man who once ruled the household now reduced to a nervous wreck. His mother sat on the steps, her face buried in her hands, looking utterly defeated. This was no longer the family that had turned their back on him. This wasn't the same group of people who had cast him aside so many times. Now, they were desperate. Ethan stood tall, arms crossed, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over him. As he watched the panic unfold in front of him, he couldn't help but feel a slight sense of satisfaction. This was what they had made him feel for years: worthless, invisible, and now, they needed him. It was almost poetic. His father, noticing him standing there, stopped pacing and turned. His face was pale, his eyes wide with a mix of frustration and fear. "Ethan, please, we need you," his father pleaded, his voice shaking. "Travis, he's in serious trouble. We need $10,000 for bail, and you're the only one who can help us." Ethan's heart beat faster, but not from sympathy. He wasn't sure how to feel about the situation. They had never asked for his help before, not like this. Every time they needed something, it had always been because of their own mistakes, their own failures. And now, they were asking him to bail out the very brother who had belittled him for years. It was a harsh reminder of everything he had been through. He glanced at his mother, who looked at him with pleading eyes. "Please, Ethan, we don't know what else to do," she said softly. The desperation in her voice was palpable, but Ethan wasn't so sure he wanted to help. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about respect, about finally taking control of his own life, his own choices. For the first time in a long time, Ethan felt powerful. They needed him, but he wasn't ready to forgive them. Not yet. His hand clenched at his side as he fought the urge to walk away, but he knew exactly what he needed to do. "I'm not your safety net anymore," Ethan said calmly, his voice cutting through the panic that filled the air. "You made your choices, and now you'll have to live with the consequences." The silence that followed was deafening. This was it. Ethan wasn't just a bystander in his family's drama anymore. He was the one in control. The silence in the air was thick, the tension so palpable that it almost seemed to hang in the space between Ethan and his parents. They needed him, but he had nothing left to give. For the first time in years, Ethan was face to face with the very people who had dismissed him, belittled him, and made him feel like an outsider. They needed him to save Travis, his brother who had made yet another poor decision. But Ethan had reached his breaking point. His mother's voice cracked as she pleaded with him. "Please, we can't do this without you. It's for your brother. We're family." The words stung, not because they were untrue, but because they carried the weight of years of neglect. Years of Ethan feeling invisible, ignored, and unimportant. His heart tightened in his chest as he stood there, arms crossed, feeling the familiar pull of guilt trying to creep in. But something inside him snapped. He was done. "You treated me like I was nothing," Ethan said coldly, the words leaving his mouth like an icy wind. "Now, you want me to fix your problems? I'm done." The realization of what he was saying hit him with a quiet intensity. He wasn't just walking away from a family, he was walking away from a lifetime of toxic behavior, of manipulation, of expectations that he always be the one to give. And he was finally ready to stop. His father stood frozen, his face turning red as he tried to comprehend the shift in power. Ethan's mother, who had always been the peacemaker, the one who tried to keep things together, was suddenly silent. The desperation in her eyes was clear, but Ethan couldn't bring himself to care. They had taken him for granted for far too long. Ethan's eyes met his mother's, and he saw the familiar pleading in them, the same look she had always given him when she needed something. But he wasn't going to fall for it anymore, not this time. "I'm done," he repeated, his voice steady. He turned and walked out of the house, the door closing behind him with a finality that echoed in his mind. He knew leaving was the right decision. The mess they had created was theirs to deal with, not his. For the first time in his life, he had the clarity to see that he didn't need to fix their problems. He wasn't their safety net anymore. As he walked away from the house, Ethan felt a weight lifting off his shoulders, a sense of peace that he hadn't known in years. It wasn't just about the money, or the lawyer, or the bail. It was about reclaiming his own life, his own worth. And for the first time, he knew that he was worth more than their neglect. He was finally free. As Ethan drove away from his parents' house, a strange sense of liberation washed over him. The weight that had been pressing on his chest for so many years finally lifted. For once, he wasn't the one cleaning up after his family's mess. He wasn't the scapegoat, the ATM. The roles had shifted. He was no longer the one expected to fix everything, to be the reliable one when his family needed something. For the first time in his life, he was living on his own terms, making decisions based on his needs, not theirs. But Ethan knew his family wasn't done. He could already feel it, their desperation, their need for him to fix things, to be the one who came to the rescue. Over the next few days, the texts and calls kept coming. His mother, his father, and even his brother, Travis, all reached out in an attempt to get him to return, to offer help. But Ethan didn't respond. He didn't need to. He was done. It wasn't until Travis texted him that Ethan felt a flicker of something deep inside. "You really going to leave me here?" the message read. For the first time in years, Ethan saw his brother, the one who had tormented him, pushed him aside, and treated him like dirt, finally understanding what it felt like to be abandoned. Ethan knew this was his moment, a chance to show Travis exactly how it felt to be left behind. Ethan's response came quickly, almost too easily. "You told me no one wanted me here," he replied with a smirk. "I'm just respecting your wishes." For a moment, there was nothing. Then the reality of the words settled in. Travis, the one who had always been so sure of himself, who had mocked Ethan for years, now knew exactly what it was like to be the one ignored, to be the one left behind. For the first time, Travis understood the isolation Ethan had felt his whole life. As Ethan put his phone down, he felt a sense of satisfaction like never before. It wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming his power, his autonomy. Ethan had finally stopped being the person his family expected him to be. He had stopped being their fallback. And for the first time, he felt free. The satisfaction of seeing Travis in a position where he needed Ethan, and Ethan refused to play along, was more than just justice, it was liberation. Ethan didn't respond to any more texts. He didn't need to. For once, the power was in his hands, and he wasn't going to give it away. In the days following the standoff with his family, Ethan finally began to feel something he hadn't in years: peace. His phone was filled with notifications, but this time, it wasn't the usual barrage of demands or guilt trips. This time, it was different. It was his family, all of them, reaching out in the family group chat. But it wasn't the typical tone. No, this time they were apologizing. They were admitting how wrong they had been in their treatment of him. They acknowledged their mistakes, the way they had cast him aside, disregarded his feelings, and used him as a fallback when things got tough. Ethan stared at the messages for a long moment, his emotions a mix of disbelief and a small, hard-earned satisfaction. After years of trying to prove his worth, of begging for basic respect from those who should have given it freely, he was finally being seen. Not because they truly understood his pain, but because they needed him. But Ethan wasn't about to let them off the hook that easily. They had to feel the weight of their mistakes. They had to understand that their actions had consequences. Without a word, Ethan picked up his phone and sent a single thumbs-up emoji in response. The gesture was simple, almost casual, but to him, it was everything. It was the final statement, the one that closed the door on their manipulation. It was his way of showing them that their apology, while overdue, meant nothing now. They had pushed him away when they didn't need him, and now, when they were desperate, it was too late. For once, Ethan had reclaimed his power. He had stopped being the person they expected him to be. He wasn't going to be the one they leaned on anymore. And for the first time, he didn't feel guilty about it. He wasn't going to carry the weight of their mistakes or their expectations on his shoulders anymore. He had learned that sometimes, the best way to love your family is to let them stand on their own and feel the weight of their decisions. He had stopped enabling them. This wasn't just a victory over them, it was a victory for Ethan himself. It was freedom. Freedom from the guilt. Freedom from the manipulation. For the first time in his life, Ethan was living for himself. And that, he realized, was the sweetest victory of all. One of the most powerful lessons from Ethan's journey is the importance of self-respect and the need to set boundaries, especially when it comes to family. For years, Ethan was made to feel invisible, like his efforts weren't enough, and his worth was tied to how much he could give others. But when he finally walked away, he discovered something profound. True love for others begins with loving and respecting yourself. In life, especially as we age, it's easy to fall into the trap of constantly giving without receiving, whether it's time, money, or emotional energy. However, this kind of sacrifice can lead to exhaustion, resentment, and a feeling of being unappreciated. Ethan's story teaches us that sometimes the most loving thing we can do is to step back, allow others to face the consequences of their actions, and reclaim our own power. We are not responsible for fixing everyone else's problems. Setting boundaries is not selfish. It is essential for maintaining our dignity and well-being. In the later stages of life, when we have already given so much, it's important to remember that we deserve respect, peace, and the freedom to live life on our own terms. By respecting ourselves, we teach others to do the same. The journey to peace and fulfillment often begins with the simple act of saying, "No, this is where I draw the line." Thank you so much for watching. We hope this video resonated with you and gave you a fresh perspective on family events and relationships. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to Silent Wars for more insightful content. Stay tuned for our next video and we'll see you soon.